Marcus Aldridge stood on the polished tick deck of his new yacht as the sun climbed above the horizon. The gentle swell of the ocean rocked the vessel in a steady rhythm. Even after years of success and wealth, he felt a restless tension in his chest. Building the yacht had been his latest grand project, a way to prove something to himself and to the world. He had spared no expense. From the gleaming chrome railings to the plush cabins lined in soft cream leather, everything spoke of luxury. Yet none of it filled the quiet ache he carried inside. That morning, Marcus had invited a handful of close friends to join him for the maiden voyage. They arrived in sleek sports cars, laughing and joking about old times. He greeted each one with a firm handshake or a quick hug, his smile warm but his eyes distant. He wanted this trip to be different from the parties and galas he usually hosted. He imagined feeling free out on the open sea, far from boardroom battles and endless media attention. As the engines purred to life, Marcus felt a brief surge of excitement. The yacht glided away from the marina, leaving a slender trail of foam. Behind, he wandered the deck, watching the water sparkle in the early light. His friends gathered at the stern, sipping champagne and leaning against the rail. They toasted two new beginnings and the promise of adventure. For a moment, Marcus allowed himself to hope that this trip might ease the loneliness he often felt. Amid his wealth and influence, the first few hours passed smoothly. The yacht cut through the calm sea, and Marcus joined his friends for breakfast in the sunlit dining area. He made small talk about market trends and upcoming conferences, but he could not keep his mind from drifting. He thought about the empty rooms of his mansion, the unanswered phone calls late at night, and the sense that something vital was missing from his life. He gazed out the window at the endless blue and wondered if he might find what he sought. On this journey, by midday, dark clouds crept across the sky. Marcus inspected the latest weather report on his tablet. A storm was brewing far to the north, but his captain assured him they were well outside its path. Confident that they were safe, Marcus shrugged off his concern and headed back to the deck. The air grew cooler, and a sharp wind began to stir. His guests brushed back their hair and laughed as they held onto their hats, but Marcus felt a tightening in his chest. He traced a finger along the railing, gripping it as the yacht lurched slightly. In the captain's cabin, the mood shifted, from casual to tense. The radar showed the storm drifting southward faster than expected. The captain called for a course change, but the sea began to churn beneath them. Waves rose like dark mountains, and whitecaps foamed at their peaks. The luxury of the yacht no longer felt secure. Marcus's heart pounded as he watched the horizon disappear behind rolling walls of water. Suddenly, a towering wave crashed over the bow, drenching the deck and sweeping away napkins, glasses, and loose items. The yacht pitched wildly and alarms blared through the cabins. Marcus grabbed the rail as the vessel slammed down into the trough. He stumbled, his vision spinning, and tried to call out to his friends. The roar of the wind swallowed his voice. Another rogue wave shattered a window near him, sending shards of glass skittering across the deck. Adrenaline surged through his veins, and he felt a sharp blow to his side as he was thrown against the rail. Pain exploded in his ribs, and the world turned upside down. He felt water rushing past his face, then darkness. For a moment, time seemed to stretch into nothingness, as if the sea itself had swallowed him whole. He could hear voices shouting. In the distance, muffled and urgent. Then everything went quiet. When Marcus Aldridge came to, he was surrounded by the steady beeping of machines. His head throbbed and he tried to open his eyes. Blinking against the harsh hospital lights, he saw rows of monitors and tubes. A nurse was adjusting an IV drip at his side. He tried to move to speak, but his body refused to respond. He realized he was trapped in a shell that felt heavy and foreign. Doctors visited him daily, speaking in calm, professional tones about his condition. Marcus listened with growing frustration. He was alive, but he could not wake up. He could not move his limbs or answer their questions. He could only drift in that strange space between consciousness and sleep. Alone with his thoughts, he replayed the accident over and over. He wondered if his friends had survived, if his family knew what had happened. He wanted to tell them he was sorry for chasing success, at the cost of simple joys. Back outside the hospital, life went on without Marcus's active hand. His company's board met to handle urgent decisions. His fortune remained tied up as lawyers and insurers debated liability. News outlets ran brief stories about his accident in Coma, then moved on to the next headline. To the outside world, he had become a footnote, a cautionary tale about the dangers of power unchecked. Inside the hospital ward, the staff spoke of Marcus in hushed tones. They remembered his visit before the accident, when he had slipped quietly into the pediatric wing and left a check to cover a child's treatment. They recalled how he had praised the nurses for their compassion and promised to support the hospital's work. Now, those same nurses cared for him in turn, their gentle voices reading him stories or playing music he might enjoy. Each afternoon, a young nurse named Karen checked his monitors and whispered updates in his ear. She told him about her own dreams of traveling the world, of making a difference in people's lives. Marcus tried to focus on her voice to find a spark of connection. He clung to her words like a lifeline, willing himself to remember them when he could not move. Weeks turned into months, and months into years. Marcus remained in his silent state, a powerful man reduced to breath and blinking lights. Visitors came and went. His old friends offered prayers and tears, but they struggled to hold on to hope. Family members argued over care plans and finances. The world outside grew crowded. With new faces and new stories, few paused to think of the billionaire in the hospital bed, locked away from the life he had built, yet the machines never rested. Nurses changed his sheets, brushed his hair, and spoke to him as if he were still fully present. They played soft music from his favorite composers and shone a lamp of warm light into his room. Marcus's body endured, suspended in a fragile balance between life and loss. Deep inside, his mind waited, waiting for a reason to return. One bright morning, a different sound entered the ward. It was a child's voice, clear and full of hope. A small girl named Amara had come to visit her own mother in the next room. Wearing a bright pink dress and holding a well-loved doll, she wandered down the hallway and paused at Marcus's door. The nurses glanced up with surprise but smiled. They had not seen a child this bold in Marcus's room before. Amara walked inside and climbed onto a chair beside his bed. She reached out her hand and touched his wrist gently. "Hello, mister," she said in a soft voice. "I'm Amara. I'm here to see my mommy, but I thought I'd say hi to you first." She began to tell him about her day at school, how she learned to ride a bicycle, and how she hoped to be a doctor one day. As she spoke, something in the room shifted. A steady beep of the heart monitor seemed to quicken, and Marcus's fingers curled around hers. At that moment, the long vigil of the machines and the quiet prayers of loved ones came together. Marcus felt a warmth spread through him. The pain faded and his mind cleared. He opened his eyes and saw the bright face of the little girl staring back at him. He blinked twice, taking in her curious gaze. Then he whispered, "Who's that little girl?" In that instant, two worlds collided. The billionaire who had lost himself in ambition and machinery found himself reborn through a child's simple kindness. The ocean storm had nearly taken his life, but it was a young black girl's brave heart that finally brought him back. And so began a new chapter undefined not by luxury or power, but by humility, connection, and the unexpected magic of hope. Marcus lay still behind clear glass, wrapped in soft white sheets and hooked to machines that breathed for him. He had entered this quiet world 2 years ago, when the storm-tossed sea hurled him against the rail of his own yacht. Now, day after day, he floated in a place where night and day blurred together. His eyes never opened, but deep inside, a part of him watched. Outside the room, the hospital hummed with ordinary life. In the hallways, nurses hurried between patients. Doctors moved from one bed to another, checking charts and giving orders. In the boardrooms of Marcus's companies, his absence rippled through spreadsheets and phone calls. Share prices rose and fell without his steady hand guiding them. His empire felt the strain of being without its leader. At home, relatives gathered to make decisions. Marcus's sister, Diana, insisted on following the doctor's advice to keep him alive. She remembered his laugh as a child, how he used to chase her around the garden and call her his best friend. But others thought it might be kinder to let him go. They argued late into the night about medical costs, legal papers, and the future of his foundation. Every few weeks, they met again, chasing fresh hopes and new fears in the hospital room. The beeping of monitors was a constant companion. These machines measured every heartbeat and breath. They forced his body to stay alive, even as his mind drifted. Sometimes Marcus sensed voices nearby.
Oh.
Nurses spoke of teamwork and deadlines. They said how he once donated a fortune to build a new lab. Doctors praised his vision but wondered if he would ever wake it first. His staff visited every day. They brought flowers and videos of board meetings, hoping his mind would catch a glimpse and stir. They read him news articles, played recordings of his own speeches, but the visits grew shorter and less frequent. The videos gathered dust on an unused shelf. Eventually, only a handful of loyal aides still came by, their faces drawn with worry. In his silent world, Marcus remembered fragments of his old life. He felt the rush of applause when he opened a new office in Paris. He smelled the fresh citrus and saw the elegant chairs in his conference rooms. He heard his own voice, calm and confident. Then those memories faded into gray shadows. His dreams took over. In one dream, he walked into a ballroom filled with strangers who stared but did not speak. In another, he tried to guide his yacht through calm water, but no matter how hard he steered, it drove him in circles. In every dream, he felt a distant tug, as if something outside himself was calling. Back in reality, the hospital staff cared for him with gentle routines. They washed his hair, turned him from side to side, and spoke as if he could answer. A nurse named Sophia hummed softly while she brushed his hair. A young orderly named Luis joked about his favorite soccer team. They treated him like a real person, not just a case file. Sometimes they stayed longer, telling him about their families or the books they loved. The doctors met weekly to discuss Marcus's condition. They called it a prolonged disorder of consciousness. They reviewed CT scans and EEG reports, looked for signs: any flicker of a smile, a change in breathing, a twitch of a finger. Each tiny movement sent a ripple of hope through the team. But the hope often faded, and they prepared the family for more waiting in the office of his home. The legal team worked through his affairs. They drafted papers to protect his assets in case he never woke. They filed motions to extend life support and negotiated with insurers. They fought battles in court over ownership of a yacht, contracts with high-profile partners, and the future of a charity fund he had started. These experts spoke in quiet tones, as if raising their voices might disturb his rest. Though Marcus could not move, he sensed the change in the air. He felt the tension of whispered debates and the hush of sorrow. He wanted to speak up, to tell them he was still here. But his body would not obey. One evening, as the sun dipped behind distant trees, a memory broke through. He saw himself standing at his mother's hospital bed years ago. She had been ill, and he had held her hand, promising to take care of her. He remembered the kindness in her eyes when he spoke words of comfort. The memory flooded him with warmth. He felt the faintest echo of his own hand touching her skin. He wished he could reach out now, wanted someone to hold his hand like that. For a moment, he felt close to waking. His fingers twitched, then relaxed. The machines hummed steadily, and the memory slipped away. Outside, life continued its march. Reporters wrote short pieces about the billionaire in Coma. They reminded readers of his lavish parties and ambitious projects. Then they moved on to other news. Few paused to wonder about the man beyond the headlines. In the hallway, cleaning staff pushed carts of linen. A young orderly knocked gently on the door and gathered up used towels. He paused, looking at the patient who lay so still. He whispered, "Hang in there, boss." Then he moved on. On weekends, hospital volunteers played soft music in the lobby. A pianist sat at a white keyboard, weaving gentle tunes that drifted through the rooms. Sometimes a violinist played Mozart in the courtyard. The melodies floated. Through Marcus's open window, felt the notes in his chest, and for a flicker, he thought he heard his own heartbeat match the rhythm in the pediatric wing down the hall. A small girl named Amara received treatment. She had come with her mother for regular checkups. Amara, 10 years old, and full of curiosity, learned every corner of the hospital. She waved at patients, asked questions of the staff, and carried her favorite doll everywhere. She called it Daisy and treated it like her little sister. One day, after visiting her mother, Amara wandered through the quiet corridors. She passed Marcus's door and noticed the beeping machines. She paused, curiously looking at the face of the man who had become so important to her and to Marcus. The nurse inside looked up and smiled kindly. She knew the girl was brave, and she nodded as if to say, "It's okay." Amara did not know his name or his fortune. She only knew he was there, alone and still. She felt a tug at her heart and stepped closer. Meanwhile, Marcus drifted deeper into his silent world. He felt a presence at the edge of his mind, gentle and patient. He sensed a small hand resting on his wrist, although his eyes remained closed. A voice, soft and clear, spoke words he could not fully hear. It spoke of school, of a bright pink dress, of dreams of helping others. The voice hovered. In the space between sleep and waking, the calm presence soothed him. He felt something warm spread through his chest, as if hope itself had found him. He thought he might open his eyes to see who held his hand. But then the moment passed, and he sank back into the stillness. In the corridor, the nurse finished. Adjusting a chart, she smiled down at the child and said, "You're so kind. I think he can feel you." Mara beamed and skipped away. Back in his bed, Marcus's body lay quiet. But inside, his mind reached out, grasping at that warm feeling. He clung to it as the machines hummed around him. Somewhere, under layers of rest and waiting, a part of him stirred. And so 2 years passed, years of waiting, years of hope, years of silent prayers. Marcus's life hung in balance between machines that kept his body alive and the kindness that tried to touch his soul. Each day, the staff cared for him. Each night, his family argued and wondered. Long days, a small girl's gentle voice began to break through the silence. Each Monday afternoon, Amara Jackson slipped into the hospital with her mother's hand in hers. She carried her favorite doll, Daisy, whose faded ribbon matched the bright pink of Amara's dress. The long corridor to the pediatric ward felt familiar now. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, and the scent of antiseptic floated in the air. Most children pressed close to their parents, eyes wide with fear or boredom. But Amara walked with purpose. She knew exactly where she would go first, past the rows of beds where adults lay quietly, waiting for visitors or medicine. On her way, she greeted every nurse she passed. "Hello, Miss Karen," she called out in her cheery voice.
Did you?
"Have a nice weekend?" Miss Karen smiled and bent down to Amara's level. She brushed a strand of hair from the girl's forehead and replied, "I did, sweetheart." "And you?" Amara nodded happily and waved her doll at the nurse. The ward was meant for adult patients. The staff had come to expect Amara's bright visits. They whispered to each other about how the girl seemed to light up every room she entered. Amara paused at room 14, where her own mother lay, recovering from a minor surgery. She perched on the edge of the bed and talked in her low, gentle voice about the adventures she had at school. She described the science project she was building, the new book she loved, and how she hoped to be a doctor one day. Her mother smiled and listened, her eyes shining. Meanwhile, Amara's doll sat propped on the pillow, as if it were also part of the conversation. But after a few minutes, Amara stood and said, "Wait for me here, Mommy. I want to show something," to another friend. Her mother looked puzzled but nodded, trusting her daughter's instincts. Amara clutched Daisy and walked back down the hall. She whispered to herself, "I hope he likes my story." The nurses watched with gentle curiosity. They did not always understand why a child would visit room 12, where Marcus Aldridge lay in a silent slumber. But they knew Amara meant well. Room 12 was at the far end of the corridor. The door stood slightly ajar, and soft light spilled out. Into the hallway? Inside, Marcus lay motionless, surrounded by monitors, tubes, and wires. His chest rose and fell in a steady rhythm, and a faint hum of machines filled the air. Most visitors came for a few moments, then slipped away, overwhelmed by the quiet gravity of the room. Amara did not notice the hush. She stepped inside. As if walking into her own playroom, She climbed onto a sturdy chair beside Marcus's bed and set Daisy on the bedside table. Then she reached out and took Marcus's hand in hers. His skin felt cool, and his fingers lay limp against hers. Undeterred, Amara began to speak. "Hello, mister," she said, her voice soft but clear. "My name is Amara. This is Daisy. She wants to say hi too." She paused to let the silence wrap around her. In that silence, she imagined Marcus waking and smiling at her. Then she carried on talking about her favorite cartoon, about her best friend at school, and about the time she rescued a baby bird she found in the yard. A nurse named Luis stood just outside the door at first. He had come in to refill a pitcher of water and freeze-dried snacks for later. He heard Amara's small voice and peeked in, stopped in his tracks and leaned against the frame, watching the scene with awe. He watched Amara speak as if Marcus were the most interesting person in the world. He listened to her storytelling, her laughter, and her simple questions. For a moment, the routine tasks of cleaning and charting felt far away. Amara noticed Luis and waved at him. "Hi, Mr. Luis. You want to help me tell him about Daisy's birthday?" Luis smiled, shook his head, and said, "No, thank you. You're doing great." Amara beamed, pleased that a grown-up noticed her brave effort. She turned back to Marcus and resumed her tale. She described the cake she baked at school, a vanilla cake with pink frosting, and how everyone sang, "Happy birthday to Daisy." She explained that Daisy had no mouth, so they pretended her ribbon tied into a perfect smile. Meanwhile, Marcus lay still, but deep inside, his mind stirred. He felt a faint warmth along his wrist, where Amara held his hand. He sensed the soft tone of her voice, the rhythm of her words weaving a story. For the first time in many days, he felt something more than the mechanical hum of machines. He felt curious. He wanted to open his eyes to see who this bright storyteller was. In the hallway, other staff paused their work. They heard the gentle storytelling drifting from room 12. They recognized Amara's voice and exchanged quick glances. One orderly whispered, "Is she still in there?" Another nurse answered, "Yes. She's telling him about her school play." The tone was respectful. They did not shush her. In this ward, moments of real human connection were rare. They knew not to interrupt. As Amara spoke, Marcus's finger on the bed rail twitched. It was a small movement, one that could be easily missed. But Amara gasped and looked down. She knelt beside the bed and gently lifted his hand, placing it atop Daisy's head. "Look, Daisy," she whispered. He's saying hello back. She laughed softly, surprised and delighted. Luis rushed in, called for a nurse, and they gathered around the bedside, his eyes wide with hope. A nurse checked Marcus's pulse and looked at the monitor. His heart rate had ticked up slightly. She placed her hand on his forehead. "He's warmer than before," she murmured. The nurses and orderly exchanged hopeful smiles. Amara sat back on her chair, rocking Daisy in her arms, proud that she had made a difference. Amara stayed another 15 minutes, sharing silly jokes and asking Marcus questions. "What's your favorite animal? Do you like cake?" With each question, she paused to let him answer. The room felt alive with her presence. When she finally stood to leave, she blew a kiss to Marcus's forehead and said, "Get better soon, mister. I need to show you my new drawing next week." Everyone watched as she closed the door gently behind her. In the quiet aftermath, the staff lingered in the room. They tidied away Daisy's ribbon and straightened the sheets. They adjusted the foreline and checked the machines. But their hearts felt lighter. They, too, had been touched by a child's courage and kindness. They whispered about how the world could learn from a 10-year-old who saw a man in a coma not as broken or hopeless, but as a friend ready to listen. That night, Marcus dreamed of laughter and color. He saw Amara's bright dress, the pink frosting on Daisy's cake, the way sunlight danced on the corridor floor. He smelled vanilla cake and felt the soft touch of a child's hand, heard his own voice, quiet and amazed. "Thank you." Then he woke her at least. He hovered at the edge of waking, feeling something he had not felt in 2 long years. Hope, and so the chance encounter in the ward sowed a spark. A young black girl's fearless heart reached across machines and time. She did not know the power of her simple act. She only knew that everyone deserved a friend and a story. In that moment, the walls between life and sleep trembled, and the first stirrings of a miracle began. The morning light spilled through the curtains, painting soft, golden stripes across Marcus's room. Outside, the hospital was waking slowly. A gentle hum of activity drifted down the hall as nurses prepared for their rounds. But inside room 12, everything felt different. The steady beep of Marcus's heart monitor quickened, and the machine seemed to lean in, waiting at first. No one noticed. A young nurse, Sophia, adjusted his blanket and checked his IV. She hummed quietly, thinking about the coffee she would grab after her shift. Marcus lay still under her gentle care, his eyes closed. Then, just as Sophia leaned away, a sudden movement caught her eye. Marcus's eyelids fluttered. She froze, her hand hovering in midair. "Dr. Patel?" she called, her voice barely a whisper. The doctor on duty rushed in, followed by 2 other nurses and a respiratory therapist. They gathered around the bed, their faces focused and hopeful. Marcus's chest rose in deep, full breaths. His eyes blinked open, and he gazed at the bright ceiling tiles above him, confusion in every line of his face. "Mr. Aldrich?" Dr. Patel asked, kneeling beside the bed. Marcus tried to speak, but his throat felt dry and heavy. A soft sound, like the whisper of a breeze. The respiratory therapist quickly offered a sip of water on a sponge swab. He took it hesitantly, his lips parting, and swallowed. The simple act it had been so long brought tears to the eyes of everyone watching. Colors came back into Marcus's world. He saw the white coats, the badges, the bright monitors flashing beside him. He felt the steady pulse of his own heart, strong and alive. He reached out a trembling hand and touched his chest. It felt warm, solid. He tried to lift his head, but found his neck too weak. A nurse slid a pillow behind him, and he leaned back gratefully. "Can you hear me?" Dr. Patel asked, his voice gentle. Marcus nodded. His gaze drifted to the door where Sophia stood, blinking back tears. He wanted to say something, thank you, or what happened. But the words would not come. Instead, he squeezed Sophia's hand, still resting on the bed rail. And she covered his with both of hers, smiling through her mask. Soft footsteps echoed in the hallway. A door opened and then closed quietly. Marcus felt a flutter of excitement. He recognized that presence. He turned his head slightly and saw a small figure stepping in. Amara stood just inside the doorway, clutching Daisy in one arm. Her eyes were wide, filled with wonder and a hint of fear. She held out her free hand, as if she were offering him a bouquet of sunshine. "Hello, mister," she said softly. Woke up. Her voice wobbled a bit, and she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. Marcus's eyes filled with gratitude. He looked at her as if seeing color for the first time. The machines around him felt distant, and the bright hospital lights softened into a warm glow. Amara took a few careful steps forward. She climbed onto the chair beside the bed and placed Daisy on the pillow next to him. "Told your finger to wiggle," she whispered proudly. And it did. She beamed, proud of her small miracle. Marcus wanted to laugh to ease the tension in the room. His lips curved into a weak smile, and Amara's face lit up brighter than the morning sun. "Doctor." Patel cleared his throat. "This little one deserves all the credit," he said, looking at Amara. "You helped bring him back?" Amara nodded, her cheeks pink. She glanced at the nurses clustered around and whispered, "Can he see me?" A nurse lifted Marcus's hand and guided it gently toward Amara. He reached with effort and touched her hand. She squeezed his fingers and then wrapped his hand around Daisy's leg, as if to say, "Now you're part of this too." A sudden rush of voices filled the room. Marcus's sister Diana burst through the door, along with his business manager and 2 close friends. They stood at the threshold, stunned. Tears streamed down Diana's face as she saw her brother awake. She rushed to his side, brushing hair from his forehead and whispering his name. Marcus tried to answer but only managed a faint rasp. That was enough. Diana placed her cheek against his and held him tightly, her shoulders shaking. Friends crowded in, offering congratulations and gentle words. One friend placed a hand on Marcus's shoulder, another dabbed at his eyes with a tissue. The room, once tense and quiet, overflowed with emotion. Sophia and the other nurses stepped back respectfully, smiling as they cleaned up the medical equipment, but leaving the heart monitors running. The machines still beeped, but now they sounded like music. "You frightened us all," Diana said, her voice breaking. "We never gave up hope." Marcus tried again to speak. His eyes found Diana's, then drifted to the group of staff at the foot of the bed, finally settled on Amara. He blinked, focusing. He wanted to say her name. He opened his mouth, but no words came. Tears welled up in his eyes. Amara stood on her chair and called, "Mister, do you remember me?" Her small voice cut through the swarm of adults. Everyone turned to her and the room grew still. Marcus fixed his gaze on the child. He cleared his throat and said, "Amara." It was raspy, distant, but unmistakable. Gasps filled the room. Yes. She cried, slipping off the chair and hopping in place. "I'm Amara. I visited you every week." She took his hand and pressed it to her heart. "I'm so happy you're back." In the following hours, doctors and therapists drifted in to assess Marcus's condition. They tested his reflexes by gently tapping his knees. They checked his strength as they helped him lift a hand. They listened as his heart beat steadily. Each test brought more smiles and relieved sighs. Marcus felt a warmth in his chest bigger than any machine could measure. Family and friends sat in the chairs around his bed. They spoke in low voices about his long journey, about the lawyers, the corporate meetings held in his absence, and the struggles they had faced. Marcus listened quietly. He felt humbled. The world he had left seemed distant and unimportant compared to this moment. By late afternoon, the sun had climbed high in the sky. Through the window, Marcus saw swaying trees and heard birds singing. It had been so long since he felt the world outside. He closed his eyes and breathed deeply, savoring the fresh air that drifted through a small open vent. He felt alive. That evening, when the visitors finally went home, the room quieted again. Staff dimmed the lights and gave Marcus space to rest. Sophia stayed a little longer, brushing his hair and telling him about her weekend plans. She told him about the bakery she would visit and the new song she dreamed of learning on piano. Each detail grounded him back in life, reminded him of simple joys. In the last light of day, Marcus thought of Amara and her brave heart. He wanted to thank her properly, to give her something she could hold on to. He smiled to himself, imagining her running down the corridor, her pink dress glowing. He drifted off to sleep with the sense that the world had shifted, felt part of something bigger, something filled with kindness and connection, and so began his journey back to life. The miracle of waking had come not through machines or medicine alone, but through a young girl's simple act of friendship. In the silent ward, a bond had formed between billionaire and child, one that no fortune could buy. Outside, in the real world, waiting beyond the hospital doors, Marcus would learn that true wealth lay in moments like these, moments of compassion, hope, and human touch. Marcus woke slowly the next morning to soft sunlight on his face. The steady beeps of machines were quieter now. His sister Diana sat beside him, gently holding his hand. When he opened his eyes, she smiled so brightly that he felt warmth spread. Through his chest, he squeezed her hand and tried to speak. Diana pressed her finger to her lips, then nodded and backed away as he whispered, "Water, please." A nurse quickly brought a glass of water on a straw. Marcus drank slowly, savoring every drop. It tasted like hope. Over the following days, therapists visited him twice a day. A gentlewoman helped him sit up and dangle his legs over the side of the bed. Now Marcus felt dizzy at first, but she held him steady. He remembered how strong he once was, the marathon he ran last year, the mountain hike he led for charity. Now every small movement felt like a victory. Each day, he pushed himself a little more. He learned to swallow solid food again. He practiced lifting a spoon, feeding himself with trembling fingers. Every bite tasted of promise. On the 5th day, Diana arranged a brief meeting in his room. The door opened, and Amara tiptoed in, clutching Daisy. She wore her pink dress again and carried a small gift bag. Marcus's eyes lit up at the sight of her. He reached out and she ran forward too. Hug his arm. She handed him the bag. Inside was a drawing, a big yellow sun, a smiling boat on blue waves, and two stick figures, one tall, one small, holding hands. At the bottom, in bright letters, she had written, "Friends forever." Marcus's heart swelled. He gently touched the paper and looked up at Amara. "Thank you," he whispered. She beamed and clapped her hands. Seeing Amara inspired him. He knew he wanted to help children like her. Marcus asked Diana and the doctors if he could meet the families of young patients. Within a week, he was wheeled into the pediatric wing. His wheelchair felt strange under him, but he gripped the arms and smiled. On his first stop, he found a small boy playing video games. His parents looked surprised to see the billionaire there. Marcus knelt beside them, introduced himself plainly, and told the boy how brave he was. Then, he signed a poster for the hospital's playroom wall. "Keep playing, keep dreaming." The boy watched in awe, and Marcus felt joy at giving a simple gift of attention. Word of his visit spread quickly. Parents brought their children to meet him. He learned names and stories. There was Lena, who loved to draw unicorns, and Jamal, who dreamed of becoming an astronaut. Listening to their hopes and fears. He used his position to promise scholarships, medical funds, and new play areas. He saw their eyes shine with excitement. For the first time in his life, Marcus felt his wealth had real meaning. Meanwhile, back at his company, Diana and trusted executives ensured the business ran smoothly. Marcus received daily briefings in the hospital's conference room. He watched market updates on a tablet and gave quick directions. He felt the old thrill of building and creating, but it was lighter now. He understood balance, success with compassion, power with humility. He planned a new foundation, focusing on children's health and education. His vision was clear. No child should feel alone in a hospital, and no dream should be limited by illness or money. One evening, Marcus sat at his bedside with Diana. The lights were dimmed, and a single lamp glowed by the window. Outside, he could see the city skyline, its lights twinkling like stars. I turned to Diana and said, "I want to throw a big event, a celebration of life and hope." Diana nodded, her eyes shining. "We'll do it," she promised. Amara by her side, Marcus smiled. He pictured a colorful gala, children laughing, families sharing meals, doctors and patients dancing together. He felt excitement buzz through him. Plans moved fast. Invitations went out to business leaders, community members, and families of hospital patients. Amara was named co-host. She practiced welcoming guests with her soft voice and bright smile. On the night of the event, the hospital atrium transformed into a garden of lights. Tables held sweet treats and art supplies.
Ow!
A small stage waited at the front. Marcus, still recovering strength, arrived in a wheelchair decorated with flowers. Amara raced to him, took his hand, and led him to the stage steps. The audience cheered. When the clamor settled, Marcus spoke. His voice was steady and warm. He shared how he lost himself chasing milestones, only to wake up through a child's kindness. He told the crowd about Amara's stories and how a simple visit saved his life. Tears filled many eyes. He announced the creation of the Friends Forever Foundation, dedicated to supporting children and families in hospitals. He pledged scholarships and funding for play areas, art therapy, and family lounges. Amara's name was on every banner. She stood beside him, beaming with pride. After the speech, families and guests mingled. Children painted on large canvases. Musicians played gentle tunes. Marcus moved through the crowd, shaking hands and giving hugs. He knelt to speak with the smallest children and shared jokes with the teenagers. He felt alive in a way he never had before. Wealth had once meant grand yachts and high-rises. Now it meant laughter in hospital rooms and the sparkle in a child's eyes. In the days that followed, Marcus continued to heal. His strength returned steadily. Physical therapy moved to the gym, where he walked with a cane. He practiced driving his wheelchair faster, then set it aside as he learned to stand. Each step reminded him how precious movement is. He cheered when he took his first unassisted steps in months. Amara ran alongside him, laughing, her arms out to catch him if he fell. They crossed the hallway together, two friends who had saved each other. Months later, Zacchaeus left the hospital for the last time. His family waited, cheering as he stepped out into the sunlight. Amara rode beside him in a small cart, waving at staff. Diana followed, carrying a bouquet of lilies. As they reached the curb, Marcus turned and said softly, "Thank you, everyone, for never giving up on me." The nurses and doctors waved, clapping back. The doors closed behind them, but the bonds they formed stayed open. Outside, Marcus paused and closed his eyes. He breathed deeply, feeling the breeze on his face. He opened his eyes and saw Amara's bright smile. He knelt and touched her shoulder. "Come," he said, extending his hand. Together, they walked toward a new life, one built on kindness, friendship, and shared dreams. And for Marcus, every step was a reminder that true wealth is measured not by what you own, but by the lives you touch.